Hello everyone, and welcome to the first CALDO webinar for 2019. This webinar will address the topic of English language proficiency, and will focus on the requirements for admission into mostly graduate programs. This webinar is being brought to us by two presenters from one of the CALDO member universities, so Dalhousie University, that have been generous enough to donate their time to talk to us about the topic of language, specifically language adapted to the admission process of graduate programs. During the first section of the presentation, you will have the chance to hear from the presenters information that will be very interesting and valuable for applications to graduate programs to Canadian universities. Afterwards, you will have the opportunity to ask questions that you may have by typing your questions in the chat box. In the case that you are not comfortable writing in English, you can write in Spanish or in Portuguese if you're from Brazil, and we will read your questions in your native language. Just to confirm, Jennifer and Tony, are you there?
We are.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Hello.
Okay. So thank you so much for taking the time to prepare this presentation. This is the first presentation that we do based on the topics of language. So it's something that it's very special. We haven't done anything like this until today, and we want to thank everyone that took the time to be online during the presentation, because if you're able to stay until the end, you can ask questions to our guests. If you're able to stay until the end, the presentation will be available at the CALDO YouTube channel, so you can always revisit it and catch any of the presentation that you were not able to attend, or see it again, or share it with your friends. So without any more delay, I would just like that Jennifer and Tony would go ahead, because I know that they will give a brief introduction of each of their profile, and afterwards move ahead with the presentation. So go ahead, Jennifer and Tony. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paulo. So welcome everyone. Thanks for being with us this afternoon. This is a little bit of a layout of our session today. And we're going to talk about first the options for meeting language requirements for admission. We're going to talk about a couple of the different common standardized exams and tests that are used for admission. Then we're going to talk about another pathway to admission, which is English for academic purposes courses. And then I'm just seeing on this slide it got cut off. And we'll move, after we talk about the EAP courses, we'll take your questions. So as Paulo was saying, feel free to ask the questions in the chat box as we go through the presentation. If you want to leave a question that occurs to you as we speak, we'll get to it at the end of the presentation. Just a quick introduction of ourselves. So as Paulo was saying, we're from Dalhousie University, which is one of the CALDO members. We're located in the province of Nova Scotia in Canada. And myself, I'm the head teacher of English language programs here, and I've worked for 15 years teaching a variety of English language courses and programs in South America, in Canada, and Europe. Tony, how about you tell us about yourself?
Hi everyone. It's great to be here. Hopefully we can give you some good tips and advice today. My name's Tony. I also work at Dalhousie here in Halifax, Canada, and I'm an expert in the field of academic English. So that's English used for university. I'm also an IELTS expert, so I'm very familiar with the bridge between IELTS and university, and between English for academic purposes and university. I have quite a bit of experience in IELTS in all of the tests, and I do lots of training, and I write blogs and things like that. So please feel free to ask questions afterwards, and hopefully we'll be able to answer them for you.
Yeah, I also wanted to add, we're going to talk about a lot of different options today, a lot of different exams. We're going to spend a little bit more time on IELTS than the others, but that is because IELTS is the most popular and most common exam, I guess, worldwide. But we're not necessarily endorsing one exam over the other. We're going to give you lots of information so that you can make the choice that best suits you. So let's start by talking about English proficiency requirements for admission. So at CALDO universities, there are usually 3 ways that you can show your English proficiency for admission: via an exam. In most cases, that exam has to be less than 2 years old. You can show a diploma from an approved EAP program at that university, or in some cases at other language schools or institutes. Or if you've done a previous degree at an English medium university. So if you're applying to a master's and you did your undergraduate degree in English, in some cases that can allow you to bypass the English proficiency requirement. Now, let's talk about these requirements in a bit more detail, though. There's a lot of variation between universities, so it's so important that you verify not just at the university that you're applying to, but at the specific program, especially at the graduate level. So for master's or PhD programs, there's a lot of variation. And, you know, for example, at Dalhousie, many master's programs require, let's say, an IELTS of 7.0 overall, but others require 7.5. So it's really important that that you know the minimum scores from exams and which exams are accepted. Most of the time, universities will require a certain overall score and then a minimum score in the different areas. So in writing, in reading, for example, you can't have below a certain score. Also, you should check if the university you're applying to offers what they call conditional admission. So what this means is you can make your application to the program even if you haven't finished fulfilling the language requirement yet. So you can, if your academic record is good and meets the requirements, you can apply. The university will issue you an acceptance that says you have 1 year to fulfill the language requirement before you start your program. So some programs, some institutions offer this, but others don't. So that's a really good thing to check. Also, you should check if your graduate program especially requires any other exams. So there's the GRE exam, the graduate record exam, and the GMAT exam, which is an exam that some business schools or MBA programs require. And those aren't language exams. They're not English language proficiency exams. So we're not going to talk about them today, but they do have a big verbal and language component. And they can be quite challenging. So check to see if your programs require those other exams as well. You should also check if your scholarship or loan, if you're financing your studies using one of these methods, if they will pay for an English course. Some do, some don't. And also the availability of certain exams in your city, how often they're offered, and if they're even offered. You know, some exams are more widely offered around the world than others. So these are all things you should check on as you're applying, as you're starting to research the different programs of study at CALDO universities.
Okay, so this is just a brief overview of the common pathway English proficiency exams to get into universities. And because I am the IELTS expert, I'm going to focus on that. And we will be providing this slideshow afterwards, right, Jennifer?
Yes.
Yeah. So you guys can refer back to all the fine points you see here. It's a good chart to compare them. So if you'll notice on the IELTS, there are several benefits to doing this. It's recognized by over 10,000 organizations around the world for study, work, and immigration. So it's a great test. And just to be clear, most of you probably already know this, but there are two IELTS tests. There's the academic IELTS test and the general IELTS test. Now, when applying for university, you guys will be focusing on the academic IELTS. If you were to do immigration, for example, you'd need the general exam. So I'm going to focus in on the academic points today. Can you switch the slide there, please? So here's just an overview of IELTS by the numbers. As you can see, it's in many countries around the world, and probably at a center near you, near where you live. There's lots of IELTS centers throughout Latin America and South America. And all of the CALDO schools do accept IELTS, and you'll often see IELTS in the application forms with the required score that you need. This is just a basic scale showing you what the numbers mean. So if someone says an IELTS 6 or an IELTS 8 or a 7, this is the chart you can use. So typically you'll have to be above a 6 and probably more likely a 7 or an 8. 8 is for the higher level programs like Masters in Business Administration or in medicine, whereas a 7 is more common for the master's programs. But as Jennifer said, make sure you check your program and school requirements before you assume any numbers. Okay. Here's the basic test format you'll be looking at if you do the IELTS for the academic. There's the 30-minute listening exam. Then the reading, which is 1 hour with 40 questions. The writing's also 1 hour with 2 tasks. So it's a summary task. You have to summarize a visual. This involves a lot of talking about numbers and graphs and charts. And then there will be an essay following that. And then there's a speaking exam. This is a one-on-one, face-to-face, person-to-person exam. And it's usually about 14 minutes for the higher level speakers. Okay. Now, just recently, IELTS, which used to be known as the paper and pencil exam, has rolled out a computerized option. You may have heard about this. Some places have the computer option, some do not. So make sure you confirm that you do have this option. There's no difference between the content of the test. However, if you're better at typing than writing with a pencil, or vice versa, if you prefer to do things in paper and pencil, that might be a better choice for you, whichever you just decide to do. Also, if you need your results fast, the computer option does have more test dates typically, and you do get the results twice as fast in about 1 week rather than 2 weeks. Okay. So this is just an overall aim you might want to think about if you decide to go the IELTS route, but this would also apply to other language proficiency exams. You can't necessarily prepare strictly for the IELTS test because it is a language proficiency grade you get. So if you just focus on language proficiency practice tests, then you might not improve as quick as you like. You have to improve your overall English, and that's the point of this slide here. So every chance you get to practice your English, whether it be reading the newspaper or discussing things of a higher level, more advanced English with classmates or professors, going to lectures in English, reading journal articles in English, all of this in total will help you improve on your IELTS score, not just doing preparation courses and practice tests. Yes, and some people, they think, oh, okay, I'll study English for 2 months or 3 months, and it's a lot. So if you look at the top right of this slide here, it says an IELTS 7 or higher represents thousands of hours. That's thousands of hours of learning. So you might be very brilliant and be able to do it in hundreds of hours. Some people are gifted, but most of us have to put in very hard, very focused work in a global way to improve our genuine English proficiency. So that's the point of these slides here, and that's something to keep in mind on your preparation journey. Okay, and this slide here, of course, you guys can revisit this later on. If you do plan to go the IELTS route, there's some great approved IELTS approved resources, and most of them are free, and you'll find there's quite a bit once you start looking into it. So you'll have no shortage of things to start studying and practicing with.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. I'm going to now talk a little bit about some of the other exams, starting with the TOEFL. So depending on where you live, IELTS may be more common, TOEFL may be more common. And I first wanted to make the distinction between the IBT, the internet-based test, which is the version of the TOEFL that is the one required and accepted at CALDO universities. And that's versus the ITP, the Institutional Testing Program. So in some places, such as Mexico, for example, the ITP, the institutional test, is quite common at a lot of universities. So just so you know that if you've done the ITP, the format is quite different than the IBT. So the ITP, the institutional test, is on paper, and it does not have a speaking section. But the IBT, the version of the test that's accepted for admission, is done on a computer. And so this, as Tony was saying before, as you're choosing an exam, you want to look at your own strengths and weaknesses in terms of doing an exam on paper or doing it on a computer. The TOEFL IBT, even the speaking section is done on a computer. Some people find that easier, some people find it more difficult. So that's something to consider. The other aspect is the writing is done on the computer as well. So if your typing skills are strong, it could be something for you to consider, to keep in mind. Two other popular exams worldwide are the Cambridge, it used to be called the CAE exam or the advanced exam. They've now changed it to be called the C1 advanced. This is an exam that's popular worldwide. It's part of the Cambridge suite of exams, and it is not an academic English exam. So in that way, it's very different from IELTS, from TOEFL, or from the Pearson exam. Because it tests general English. So, you know, instead of reading academic texts, you may read a text from a newspaper or a magazine. Instead of writing a description of a graph or a mathematical figure, you may write an email or a review of a movie, for example. So if your background and training has been more in general English, this could be one for you to consider. It's a paper-based exam with a face-to-face speaking section, and it is offered in a lot of places around the world. There's also the Pearson academic exam. This one is newer, and it's maybe not as widespread as IELTS and TOEFL or the Cambridge exams. It's completely computer-based as well. And what is distinctive about the Pearson exam is that there are a lot of different question formats, and there's more variety of question formats than some of the other exams. So you may have to do things like, you know, write something that's being dictated to you that you hear. You may have to read a text aloud. And there's a large variety of other tasks. So this could be a good one. For example, if you've done the IELTS or the TOEFL, some of the more common exams, several times, and you're getting a bit stuck. You know, maybe you're finding it hard to progress. You may want to just change things up a bit and consider the Pearson exam. Now I'm going to tell you about another option, which is an EAP course. So this is an English for Academic Purposes course. Now, all the CALDO universities have a university language center, and all of these centers offer pre-admission courses, also called pathway courses. You may hear that term. In most cases, the university offers an English course that satisfies the language admission requirement without you having to do an IELTS or TOEFL exam or another exam. So just check with the requirements of your program that they have a pathway English program. And you may also check with your supervisor, your loan, or your scholarship provider to see if they will fund an EAP course. Because if you can, I very, very, very highly recommend doing an EAP course if you have the time, the resources, and the money available. Having worked in an academic English environment for many years, I can say it's very, very highly recommended. And these are the reasons why. First, when you do an EAP course, the content is more specialized than an exam. And it includes more specialized academic English skills that will prepare you for the real demands of doing a course of study. But you'll also learn academic skills, so skills related to carrying out research, using libraries, writing from academic sources, academic integrity, and the expectations of a Canadian university classroom. You'll also get access to the university facilities, so you can start using the libraries. You can, in some cases, start using the resources of your department, and it helps you get into the university life a bit quicker. So as I was saying, it's not always an option for everyone because, you know, it does require an investment of time and money to come to Canada early to do an English course. But if that is an option for you, it is very recommended. And the reason is because, you know, studying in a language that's not your first language is a big challenge. It's a big project. And so I encourage you all to think beyond admissions. So, you know, we're here today talking about the requirements to get into university, but don't forget to think about what happens once you are at university. If you're a graduate student, especially a master's or PhD student, you're going to be attending lectures, you're going to be reading very complex texts, you're going to be writing a document that could be 60, 80, 100, 200 pages long in English. You're going to be collaborating with colleagues, maybe presenting at conferences, maybe working as a teaching assistant. And so that involves a very, very high level of language. So like Tony was saying earlier, there is a lot of learning and preparation that goes into bringing your language up to that level. You'll also have to develop the disciplinary language. So the English related to biology or business or mechanical engineering to be able to work and study in your discipline. And so that can involve vocabulary, writing style, text types. And you'll have to get used to perhaps the different teaching style in the Canadian university. There are lots of resources at the university that can help, the English Language Center, writing centers at most universities, as well as resources available online. So I encourage you, whether you do an exam or you come to Canada to do an English language course for all or part of your English language preparation journey, to start to think about developing the disciplinary language associated with your field. Okay. Questions? So that's kind of a very quick overview to a lot of different information. As Paolo and Tony were saying, the slides will be available for you online. But here we are. If anyone has any questions about any exams, about admission requirements, about studying and doing graduate work in another language, we're here.
So thanks so much, Jennifer and Tony. So right now, there's a message of someone that joined now, but for Louis, we will have this presentation available on our YouTube, and everyone that registered will receive an email afterwards with the link of the present where they can find the presentation. So I noticed that some people are already writing, so we will just wait a couple of seconds, because I'm pretty sure that some questions will pop up, and we can take the opportunity to have Jennifer and Tony with us today to bring a bit more clarity to this topic.
Just while people are writing their questions, I wanted to mention a really common question when I will be traveling with CALDO to different universities. A really common question I get is, how long is it going to take me to get to whatever, an IELTS of 7 or a TOEFL of 100 or whatever? And all of that depends on your level when you start. If you've never done an exam before and you want to have a general idea of your level, if you, without recommending a particular site, if you go on Google and just Google online English exam, there's several websites where you can do a quick exam that will give you a very, very general idea of your level. You know, there's a lot of caveats to that. Remember, they're usually very quick, very general exams, but it can give you just an idea of your language level. Danielle Martinez Calderon is asking about the prices of English courses at the university. So they can vary, usually per term, and these are full-time courses. So I'll give you the example from Dalhousie, and most of the universities in CALDO would be similar. You could be studying anywhere between 20 and 30 hours a week, so very, very intensively. I would say they could be anywhere from $4,000 to, let's say, $5,000, maybe $6,000 per semester. So there is some variation in terms of the format, the length of the courses, the number of hours per week specifically, but I would say that, and that's Canadian dollars. So each of the language centers for the CALDO universities would have their prices online. Dalhousie's, for example, is $4,500 for a 12-week semester. So let me see, another question. Someone asking, Erandi Guzman asking about the Masters in Computer Science and if they accept admissions via an EAP program, and that's true, they do. So all of the master's programs at Dalhousie accept the EAP diploma at our language center. Erandi Guzman has also asked, how many classes do I need to take in EAP? Each university is different. It depends on the way the course is set up. Some you'll be studying intensively and full time. Some universities break up the week into 3, 4, 5 different courses. So that would depend on the particular language institute, but you will be studying intensively and full time. Erandi Guzman is also asking, could I take only writing and grammar courses? Most of In terms of the admissions pathway, so EAP programs that fulfill admissions requirements, most of those are what we would call 4 skills courses. So you'd be doing reading, writing, listening, and speaking for those admissions courses. Most universities, though, as well offer, if you were admitted to your master's or PhD and you wanted to do some extra work, extra support, and extra learning in just writing and grammar, most universities would have an option, maybe a shorter course, a part-time course, or an evening course you could take just in writing and grammar. Okay, so Cristiano Santos is asking, is it possible to arrange the opportunity to work as an academic assistant before taking the course? And so this would be this would depend a lot on your particular program, your supervisor. In some cases, when you apply to a graduate program, you can make arrangements with your supervisor to work as a teaching assistant or a research assistant. In some cases, you would respond to a job posting independent of your supervisor. But definitely if you're, and that can be sometimes arranged with your supervisor via email before you arrive. In some cases, that's an advantage to being in Canada, is that you can meet with your supervisor in person and you can explore opportunities. But if that's something you're interested in, I would ask your supervisor or your program coordinator about those opportunities during the application process. Luis Alderete is asking, do Canadian universities accept the TOEFL ITP exam to apply to PhD courses? And the answer for that is no. Canadian universities only accept the IBT, or I should say, I'm referring to CALDO universities. There may be some universities out there in Canada that may accept the ITP, but I think it would be quite rare. The IBT, the internet-based test, is the standard for admission. Okay. Daniel Martinez Calderon, are there any scholarships for EAP? Are there online options from the universities? In terms of the university offering scholarships for EAP, usually, I'm going to say usually there are not. Now, with the exception that sometimes a particular supervisor will have funding available for a very desired student to take an EAP course. So I would ask with your supervisor. And in some cases, some scholarship programs, some national scholarship programs do make allowances for English language programs. So they may provide up to 1 year of EAP training before you start your graduate program. Hector Mayol Novo is asking, I'm planning to study a PhD program in hydraulic engineering. What is the minimum score required of the TOEFL? So Hector, that really depends on which university. So I encourage you to go on to the website for the hydraulic engineering programs at each of the university you're considering and to look up the requirements. It could be at Dalhousie, a PhD in engineering, the requirement is a TOEFL of 92, but that's just at one university, so it could be a bit different. Tony, here we have a question. There are 2 types of IELTS tests, academic and general training. Which one should we take for a graduate program?
For university, anything to do with university, I would focus on the academic. The general exam is usually for work and always for immigration in Canada. So focus on the academic for anything university related.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Henry Kocha, sorry. Could I apply for a master's program while I am studying an EAP program? And the answer to that is yes, if the master's program you're applying for offers conditional admittance or conditional acceptance. Many programs do, and so in that case you could start studying EAP, and then you can submit your application to the Masters while you're here in Canada and doing the EAP. But once again, please check with your Masters program, because some programs don't offer that option. John Salom Barros, when presenting to the admission of the university, can I present an exam of a general type, or does it have to be of the academic type? If it's the IELTS, it does have to be the IELTS academic, but there are some exams that are not academic exams, but are general English exams, such as the Cambridge Advanced C1. And that's a general English exam, but it is accepted at a lot of the CALDO universities. So it depends on which general exam and which university. Another question about the IELTS test, if it's so different from the TOEFL test. I took TOEFL test twice. Tony, do you want to give a few comments about it?
Could you be more specific with your question? I don't know a whole lot about the TOEFL test, but I can answer any specifics about the IELTS if you like. Jennifer?
Okay, maybe we'll go on to the next question, and then Hector, if you want to be more specific. So going on to the next question, is it possible to apply for a master's degree in biology without having the acceptance of the IELTS tests? So once again, if the master's degree in biology at the university you're considering, if they have conditional acceptance, then yes, you could apply without having a high enough score on the IELTS. So that's something worth checking with the particular program and university. Just to go back to the IELTS versus TOEFL comparison, so I guess the biggest comparison or biggest difference would be, yeah, let's go back to this slide.
There it is.
So the biggest difference is if you're not doing the IELTS computer-based test, which is relatively new, the TOEFL is completely on the computer, whereas IELTS, you have the option to do it with paper and pencil. The other big difference is the speaking section. So even on the IELTS computer-based test, you are doing the speaking exam with a human, with an examiner, versus on TOEFL, where you're speaking into a microphone, into the computer. And as I was saying earlier, some people like this. They like speaking to the computer because they don't feel stressed because they're not with a person. But some people find it very strange to talk to a computer screen. So that may be an issue for you. And I'm seeing some people are putting some comments in the chat. Some people find the examiner to be intimidating. Some people find it more reassuring. So it really depends on you. I would recommend taking going online and trying to find a practice test of any test you're considering. So Tony gave us some resources about for IELTS. On each of those slides of the other tests, there's some, you can download practice tests and just give it a try to see which one you like better. And so another question here, which one is easier, IELTS or TOEFL? Once again, I think it depends on each person. Now, Tony, can you tell us a bit, on the IELTS exam, some of the content is more academic and then some is a bit more general, no?
It's a mix of general English and academic English. And easy and difficult, we shouldn't use these words with these kind of exams because we're giving you a language score. So we just want a sample of your language, and then we give you a number, which is an official number used for academic acceptance or immigration or pay scale at work. So using the word easy or difficult, we shouldn't think that way. you just go and you do your best, and we get a good sample from you, and then you get a grade. So, and the tests are very professional, very well developed for this reason. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it really depends. We're getting some opinions here about, you know, TOEFL you have to do in one day, whereas IELTS, sometimes you do the speaking exam at a different time than the other parts of the exam. So that's one element. But once again, with the computer-based IELTS now, that is probably not necessarily always the case.
Yeah, maybe you can type very fast and you're very comfortable with typing, or maybe you like talking face-to-face, as Jennifer mentioned before. And IELTS Task 1 writing, you have to be able to write an academic summary about a visual. So if you're not ready for that, it might trip you up, might be a little bit more difficult, but that's simply being prepared, so doing some practice tests beforehand.
Yeah, so I guess one thing, as I've just mentioned, is whichever exam you're considering is to go and find practice tests. I'm just realizing too, on this slide that compares 4 tests, the IELTS, the CALE, TOEFL, and Pearson, we didn't mention the CALE exam. The CALE exam, C-A-E-L, is a Canadian academic English exam. We didn't spend a lot of time on it because it's not offered outside of Canada right now. But if you find yourself in Canada, and perhaps if you've done some studies or spent some time in Canada, it is an academic exam that most of the CALDO universities accept. So it could be one for you to consider. I have some questions about the information on fees and prices for the EAP program. And that would vary depending on which institution. So that would be a matter of getting in touch with the individual university language center where you'd like to study, and they can give you all the information about the prices, the hours, the housing, and things like that. A question about Dalhousie University. If I take the EAP course, would I also need to take IELTS or TOEFL exams for a PhD application? And so this would be perhaps not just at Dalhousie, but if your university and your program offers conditional acceptance and they have an EAP pathway program that is approved, then you don't have to do the IELTS or TOEFL to become admitted to the university. Yeah, so once again, it comes back to getting the specifics about your program. I might say that through CALDO, if you were wanting to get in touch with any of the CALDO universities, any of the university language centers, if you come through CALDO and go through their channels, they can put you in touch with whatever you need, whichever person, whichever office, whichever center you're looking for information about, they can help put you in touch with the right source of that information.
Yeah. Jennifer, with candidates if they are trying to reach any of the language school of the CALDO universities. So just a quick, you have gone through all the questions that were at the chat?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So since we have gone through all the questions, I think we can wrap this presentation for today. And as Jennifer was mentioning, for any questions that you may have in the future, you can always reach out to the CALDO office, and we will try to either assist you directly or put you in contact with the person from the language school of the CALDO University that you're trying to reach. So thank you so much, Jennifer and Tony, for taking the time to be with us today for this presentation.
Thank you. It's our pleasure. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet everyone. Best of luck on your journey.
Yes.
Yes, and thank you to everyone that attended the live presentation. Afterwards, you will receive an email with the link for the video where the presentation will be stored in our YouTube channel. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the week.